Good morning, dear colleagues. We start round table. What to do with Ukroboronprom, directions and goals of the reform. The floor is given to Yuriy Gusev, the former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, public figure, co-founder of the International Center for Security and Defense Strategies. Thank you, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you. So the initiative to hold this round table belongs not only to me, but also to NGOs who co-organized the meeting. And I thank NACO team, represented by its leader, Olena Tregub, and also State Watch and International Center of National Security and Defense. Today we are going to speak about Ukroboronprom, and I would like to give the floor to our moderator, Igor Kabanenko, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine. First, I would like to present all participants of the round table, and then we are going to move forward according to the agenda. At today's round table, we have Yuriy Gusev, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine and co-founder of the International Center for Security and Defense Strategies, Aivaras Abromavičius, former Minister of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine, Olena, Tregub, Secretary General of the Independent Anti-Corruption Defense Committee, Kanevsky, Head of the State Watch Expert Organization, Denis Gurak, ex-Deputy Director General of Ukroboronprom, David Arachamia, Chairman of the Volunteer Council at the Defense Ministry in 2014-2017, Stanislav Lyudkevich, businessman and public figure. And I'm Igor Kabanenko, UARPA President, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, co-founder of the International Center for Strategic Safety and Security Defense. First we will give the floor to our participants, then we will have Q&A session. So your questions will be welcome. And our topic is what to do with Ukroboronprom, directions and goals of the reform. So 4 issues will be discussed: what is wrong with Ukroboronprom, what are the ways to introduce changes, and what issues should be resolved first: political, economic, then public partnership, and whether business needs Ukroboronprom as an intermediary. Also, points of growth of the sector and how to involve world leaders and international experience of reform. And also, we have 10 minutes for each participant, and we will follow this agenda. Sorry, 5 minutes, not 10. I would like to give the floor to Denis Gurak, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine. The floor is yours. Thank you, Igor. I'm happy to be the first to speak. All the issues are really acute. So this issue is really difficult. This reform, even in 2014, it started, but in these 5 years, it was not efficient. But the leadership of Ukroboronprom and there were the announcements of the start of the reform starting 2016. All 4 points are interconnected in one continuous process. I would like to outline the main idea. I dealt with and I take care about this. I left Ukroboronprom 1 year ago. I believe that the main priority for the state is this reform. Ukroboronprom is not only just state enterprise or a concert that creates something and earns money from this, and some individuals earn money. This is a strategic state asset, without which Ukraine will lose defense capabilities. It should be reformed immediately. So there's no time to wait. Why I'm speaking about this urgency? Because there are political reasons, and the new president should do something about it, taking into account all those events, some scandals. Once again, I would like to say I do not know what topic was discussed the most in discussions about reforms. The president has all opportunities and capabilities to do it independently from the parliament. Of course, we need to adopt the law, and there should be provisions from the government. But international audit should be conducted in Ukroboronprom, and there should be internal restructuring that should lead in the future to corporatization, and this will lead to attraction of foreign investment, and this will increase military capability. And I believe that the president has all political and legal grounds to do this. Why it should be done immediately. So we lose competitiveness in international markets. I know this for sure because during 4 years I was dealing with this issue, and in 2 or 3 years Ukraine won't have something to sell, and when our plants start selling, they won't be able to function and to support our equipment, because these contracts, foreign contracts, they help the enterprise to stay afloat. So I won't go into detail about this, but this is a fact. So the ministry should increase the order for both state and private enterprises. Otherwise, Ukraine won't be able to be in battle readiness. And we have from 4 to 7 years for this, and that's why all the activity of our enemy, of Russia, that started 1991, they influenced greatly on Ukrainian forces to decrease their capabilities, and this selling out of military stocks that only stopped with the start of war. It was well-planned special operation to decrease our military capabilities, and it continues. And one of the elements is to delay this reform. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Aivaras Abromavičius, former Minister of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for invitation. As one of the architects of the corporate management reform in state companies, I would like to draw attention to that part of Ukroboronprom reform, which is about the supervisory council. With the new president, I believe that we should stop discussions about liquidation of Ukroboronprom, because those who want to liquidate it now, they want to hide something, the results maybe of their offenses. So I believe that, even keeping in mind that situation is not favorable in the eyes of society, and many people believe that it should be liquidated, but nevertheless, we should not liquidate it now. And of course, we had to dismiss that person who had brought the company to that miserable level. So the fraud, theft, and friends, which kept to be the practice in the company, should become unacceptable, especially from the financial reporting point of view. That's why I believe that the financial audit should be carried out. The latest report, which is available at the moment, is for the year 2016, while we have the year 2019 now, and I think this situation is also intolerable when we look at those companies which are listed in the New York Stock Exchange, for example. They place and they post all the reports every year. On the other hand, we should not limit ourselves in appointment of a new leader of the company, new manager of the company, with some limitations, invented limitations, like gender or civil status of a person. Look at American companies. They have directors who are women, who are civilians, and they even take experts from different sectors of industry. And I believe for Ukroboronprom, which is a huge company, we need different people with different experience. Some should be familiar how to cope with inflation, others should be experts in financial or marketing experts. Lockhart Martin is a good example, I think, and it could be taken as a model. As any company in our country, Ukroboronprom, being 100% state property, should be managed transparently. Besides that, we have to supply state-of-the-art machinery and equipment to our soldiers, and we are we have good models, role models to follow in other countries with a similar structure of defense industry in the economy, and we can contribute to the development of national economy. Being the Minister of Economy during my term, I recollect our meetings. We discussed the establishment of the supervisory board in that Obroronprom, and immediately the battle between the president and the cabinet started for the candidate to this position, and we were informed that nobody would not allow us to reform the company management. And we even were advised to get a candidate into position of Ukroboronprom general manager, who was 83 years old, although I believe that this company needs new and young people.
Спасибо. Слышно, да? Нормально. Смотрите, у меня...
Нормально?
I immediately would like to say that, and probably my opinion would differ from the majority of opinions, but I used to criticize Obroronprom for several years, but from the moment when I went into the Obroronprom, I immediately understood that it was not so easy. Please raise your hands who believe that managers of those enterprises who are members of Ukroboronprom can be fired or appointed by me as a director. Can I fire, for example, director of the Malyshev plant? The first mistake is to believe that those people, those managers, general managers, could be dismissed by me. No, I cannot do this. Well, I should do a lot of half-legal actions to be able to do that. When Ukroboronprom was established as an agency, probably the purpose was to control its financial flows. Probably it was a pseudo-managerial structure to control financial flows. Then I understood how the export operations to the West are organized, and when I was appointed, and after that I started to visit first our exhibitions and understood how spec expert had been working. I also understood that there are a lot of myths around spec expert work. We keep saying that we are big traders of weapons, but 90% of what we are selling, these are the residues from those contracts which were concluded in the Soviet Union, and actually we are gathering crumbs from the table of Russia. That is what they omit during their contracts. Those buyers, those who have contracts. As for innovative products, we have nothing to offer. I reviewed all the contracts contracts concluded by Antonov company, and I found out that during last 6 years Antonov company produced no new makes of planes. So the illusion was created that we were strong, that we were wealthy, that we had a lot of potential. If people work for the local market, domestic market, and produce some equipment or weapons, it can he or she can earn maximum 5% of margin, while you have to pay to your IT expert something like $2,000 per month, and this salary would never be approved as a salary in the state structure. And the only advice is to hire 20 people to show the official salary as minimal, and thus to get this $2,000. So when my assistant came to manage 100 enterprises of the Ministry of Defense, but he found out that only 3 of them out of that 100 were operational, and he allowed the others to be closed. So when we speak about audit, we are mainly speaking about financial audit, while I believe we should do the managerial audit and cancel maybe some old myths, old so-called potentials, which are not potentials anymore. And that's a difficult task. Just imagine 80,000. Just imagine that this is a private company, and when these are your own resources, you need 3-4 years to reform this company in a country where we have just newly elected president, with the uncertain situation with the parliament. This is the story for 6 years, and starting the reform, we should keep in mind how big currency earnings we could expect per year per capita of each employee of this company. And we should look at the market of weapons. Market of weapons is built on the personal contacts and personal business experiences. If you had business experience with a partner in the past, you should use that experience. But in India, for example, it's not possible to conclude any deal, to sign any deal without so-called official presence to a specially established agent. And during court proceedings, the NABU representative incriminated to us this so-called presence, which are official in India. And I asked him directly, are you thinking about the government of India, or are you thinking about our contracts? While our competitors, they widely use bribes, etc.
Насамперед звернути увагу на те, що, мабуть, в цьому питанні існують
I would like to draw your attention to the fact that there are more narrow aspects of this issue and more broad issues, the regulations, rules, the market rules, the regulations existent in Ukraine as to defense economy. In terms of narrow approach, I would suggest to discuss about viable business approach. And I am an advocate of clusterization, of the Ukroboronprom clusterization of the Ukrainian defense economy. We should have the clusters of finished manufacturings. Currently, we have wrapped clusters, which are, or divided clusters, which are divided between the private and the state-owned enterprises, and only having created these closed, competitive, efficient clusters, state-owned clusters, we will understand how to develop these clusters further. And when we have mixed manufacturing with mixed clusters, private and public, it's difficult to understand whether private are efficient or state are efficient, state part is efficient, and now Ukroboronprom is dealing with mainly promotion, but it has no opportunity to determine the business structures, etc. Actually, it is a fake structure. We have to reform the defense industry sector in Ukraine. We have come back to the law about private-public partnership. Without it, it won't be possible to work. Currently, all the procedures are built up in the interests of the public sector, while private sector has no part to play at all. For example, let's take the consumables or spare parts, and 1% should be delivered for spare parts and consumables. 20% should be allocated for material parts, which means that in high-tech sphere, we are lagging far behind. If you want to have high-tech production, then you should offer higher salaries to engineers. Actually, this demonstrates that the state is unable and not interested to provide necessary favorable conditions for development of innovations. Today we mentioned the software, and the software development is not taken into calculation of the consumable materials, only the hardware. And what to do with the hardware? While today in the defense and military equipment, we discuss much about artificial intellect, about software, etc. Who are those people in our governmental bodies who start thinking where are those entry points for innovations which we have been discussing so much? And of course, the issues of access, the issue of state defense requests or orders.
Експортно-імпортних операторів.
Also, the dual use products production and permits for production under conditions of new generation of innovations. All those issues should be resolved in order for us to have the technical
Вітаю, пані.
Olena Tregub. Thank you, Yuriy, for this wonderful initiative. And I agree with Mr. Kabanenko that there is a broad circle of issues our state should work on. These issues should be resolved if we want to speak about success of Ukroboronprom or Ukrainian military and defense sector. NACO now studies the issue of state military order, law on state military order, and how to reform it. So the state requires the adherence to this percentage, 1%, 3%, now 5%, 30% for the works, and they do not allow to work on order, not private companies, not state enterprises. So these are Soviet methods of formation of price. And this sphere cannot efficiently develop. Also, 99% of state order is secret, and this provides opportunity for corruption. Also, we work to resolve this issue. Also, the law on national security adopted in June last summer, it says that Ukraine should review its military sector to understand how to build the sector. Now this process is not started. We have US and British advisors. We communicate with them, but we should clearly understand who will carry out this audit. Also, national security law provides that there should be a competent body that would formulate the policy in the sector. Now we have only the provision. They added 27 personnel to the Ministry of Economy, and the ministry will become such body, and they will have this competent authority, competent figure mentioned by Mr. Kabanenko, who will work on the sector. But this was not done. Also, there is a broader issue, the law on state secret. This law should be changed because it directly influences the efficiency of the sector and Ukroboronprom. That's why this is a big sphere, and I believe that new leadership and the administration of Zelensky, they will understand that it should be done on a larger scale, and it cannot be done locally by changing some managers. Now we go to the issue what can be done without these big steps. Our organization has been dealing with these issues for 2 years, the issues of auditing Ukroboronprom to form independent supervisory board there. So what are the results of this? First, as we know, the audit was announced a long time ago, and now the Prime Minister announced that 32 million are allocated for part of this audit using state money, and the Ukroboronprom should return this money, and this process will be launched. And Grossman made an ultimatum that there should be selection of auditors on the 25th of May, but as we see, it didn't happen. So, about the audit, I would like to state this is not only about financial audit. According to international standards, it is only one of the three lots. There are two lots. So this first is technological and strategic review that will provide the opportunity to understand how to organize the clusters, with whom to integrate, and what spheres are the most good for Ukroboronprom. And the second lot is legal diagnostics and the assessment of corporate governance and the assessment of political risks for Ukroboronprom, and the recommendations of this firm that will carry out this audit, how to build the system of corporate governance in Ukroboronprom to have the least possible involvement of the state. About existing supervisory board, 11 people, 3 nominated by the president, 2 by prime minister. As of today, it is not active because 2 nominated by President Cherkassky and Skilko, they were not reappointed. Also, there is head of this council, Mr. Skurovsky, from KPI University, and also there is one person from Cabinet of Ministers. This person is from America, and one position is still vacant. So there are no independent members that would be nominated by the committee, and the supervisory board is volunteers. They do not get payment, and you may ask about their meetings. They meet really rarely. They do not function properly. They do not have proper access to information. Everything is state secret. And in their statute in Ukroboronprom, there are no proper provisions about supervisory board. Do they have proper influence on decision-taking? When 2 enterprises were incorporated, who decided it? This was decided by managers, and the supervisory board only was provided the information about it. So there is no proper corporate governance in Ukroboronprom, and some steps can be made in legislation in order that the supervisory board function properly as we have.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Alexander Polishuk, who is an expert on the security, building, statehood development, and who is a military diplomat. Good morning. Thank you for invitation to participate. Thank you for invitation to participate in this roundtable, which is discussing approaches to modernization, which involves not just Ukroboronprom, but the whole defense and security sector, because without state-of-the-art equipment and machinery, we won't be able to establish the high-tech army able to repel the modern threats. Ukroboronprom I believe, is unable to ensure all the needs of the defense sector. Why do I think so? First of all, it is an obsolete structure. On the second hand, the armed forces are currently unable to produce any military and technical approaches and thus to determine their needs in weapons and machinery. Many times I kept saying that in 2023 the life cycles of those aircrafts which are used, assault crafts, bombing crafts, attack crafts, etc., will be finished. Bulgaria for 3 years has been working on the design of new aircrafts, battle aircrafts. Bulgaria has been being the member of NATO for 15 years now, but nevertheless they have a disastrous situation with all their military machinery and equipment, and I don't think that there is a much sense in a long-term audit. The Chamber of Accounts is able to carry out the audit, financial audit, the policy, what should be produced and what numbers it should be produced, etc., should be developed by the armed forces, and thus we have to decide after that what we will procure from abroad, because Ukraine won't be able to produce the innovations within 1-2 years. Look at Bulgaria. For me, it's not understandable why within 5 years, with general course on Euro-Atlantic integration, the European Directive number 82 from 2009 was not approximated in Ukraine, which is about procurement of military equipment and technical characteristics. We should make the rules in our market understandable for our partners. We may involve to joint production those who might be interested in such joint production. Speaking about Bulgaria and the assault aircraft design, for example, they have not involved Gripen, for example, because they never used Gripen aircrafts in their practice, military practice. So I don't want to advertise for the sake of any company today, but I strongly insist that we have to decide what we need to strengthen our defense, or what we specifically need from what companies, and having developed such a policy, we will be able to show to our partners what we want to do. You mentioned the law on the private-public partnership. I believe that it should be passed as soon as possible, especially when it comes to a public-private partnership in production of defense equipment and machinery. And of course, the audit, the review of the defense and security complex should be done. But who has to carry out that audit? I believe that a big mistake would be to allow to do this to Ukroboronprom itself or to the Ministry of Economy and Trade. The Ministry of economy, I don't believe they have the capabilities today. Of course, there is a decision that the audit should be carried out, so we have to decide quickly who will be involved specifically in this audit, including the involvement of international experts. I would like to give the floor now to Gleb Kanevsky, the State Watch organization expert. Good afternoon. I'm representing the State Watch, which is carrying out the anti-corruption project in defense sector. And today I would like to provide you with the figures from the state audit, which in early 2019 were provided to the Cabinet of Ministers. They are very illustrative because they demonstrate the problems which have been persistent in Ukroboronprom for years. These were about the tank plants in Kiev, Kharkiv, Shapotivka, etc., who participate in who contribute to the overhaul of our tanks, which are used in at the front line. The audit had revealed that there are no investments plans in those plants, and thus those plants are not thinking where to find money for the development. They have no strategic plans. They do not have any idea whether they will be developed in the framework of clusters or beyond clusters. And also the audit found some financial violations. For example, in Zhytomyr, in Kharkiv, we found the losses amounting to 5 million hryvnia. Kiev and Mykolaiv tank plants have got 10 million of fines from the Ministry of Defense because they have not supplied the ordered goods on time. Shapotivka plant has lost 21 million loan in the private bank, which went bankrupt, and now this money are not accessible. Now, coming back to the issue of audits, we have been following up the previous audits from the previous years. The audits had been carried out during 2016, 17, 18, and 19, but they have not got any attention in the government. So it was mentioned that the audit requires 132 million hryvnia, while the government had allocated only 32 million hryvnia. So let us focus on the most crucial aspects of the audit, that is to develop a program to do with the Ukroboronprom. During last years, the private market has been developing fast, and many state enterprises, they fade. In 2017, 17% of public Ukroboronprom enterprises were almost unoperational. Mayak plant, which has been producing the grenade launchers, Molot, but actually it is almost bankrupt. We witness hostile mergers. It is under criminal proceedings. There are multiple financial violations, and nobody wants to rescue this so-called strategic plan. In Zhytomyr Oblast, we have a plant which had been producing gunpowder, but for many years it's producing nothing. They appealed to the government, but nothing happened. I don't think it's a strategic approach when in the fourth year of war the plant which has to produce gunpowder has to encourage the government to think about their salaries. So we have to carry out the audit in all the enterprises of Ukroboronprom. You mentioned that you cannot dismiss the directors and on Ukroboronprom, but you should be able to dismiss those who allowed financial abuses, and we have to carry out the inventory checks, inventory inspections of all the all the stocks, and having revealed the shortages to procure necessary equipment from abroad. I would like to ask Alexander Leminov, would you like to add something? Thank you for this opportunity to speak about political responsibility. Not only the state is responsible for all the shortcomings which we heard today. It is important not to allow all those violations, difficulties, just to persist. Our position as a state watch is clear that we should do something now. We should start doing. Let us clearly focus the attention of the new country's leadership on Ukroboronprom and security issues. One of the areas of our organizations is the security service of Ukraine information. It's not our topic today, but we should focus attention of new leadership on the problem points. Without such focus, we will get nothing. We will get no progress. I would like to give the floor to Stanislav Lyudkevich, a businessman and civil activist. Dear colleagues, I would like to discuss what was already mentioned, the interaction between private and public sectors. Recently, at one of the fora, the president mentioned that we have to turn our shortcomings into advantages due to new innovative technologies. The experience proves that the best way is to support competition. Let's look at Israel. They started from the military embargo, while today they have 80% of their export in high-tech, military export in high-tech produced by private companies. Let's look at the United States, who are leaders in R&D. Others, Microsoft, Tesla. No, this is the government of the United States of America, because they are the biggest client, the biggest supporter of R&D. 22% of the national defense budget is allocated in lesser amounts from year 2-year. This suggests that private sector is becoming more and more important player and driver in the investments to R&D. While in Ukraine we have been having this law on private-public partnership in the parliament. Unfortunately, it was not passed. The passage of this law would be a first step for involvement of private capital, private intellect into the defense and security sector. We are much speaking that we should move from the war in trenches to the war in technologies. So the main steps to ensure a high-tech situation in our army and in our security and defense sector should be expected from the private sector. Involvement of big players with private capital from abroad would stimulate local private players. We have big intellectual resources like IT, like cyber security, then more narrow experts in aviation, avionics. And we have private companies in this area. So we have to motivate our companies to develop further. The latest example is Southern Korea. 100% of defense industry belongs to the private sector. Now they have tanks with remote control, where they have ships, battleships with remote control, artillery systems with remote control. So all such R&Ds may save up to 2,000 of soldiers. So we should shift from discussions about man-force and army of the man-force to discussions about tanks.
I would like to give the floor to Yuriy Gusev, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine and a co-founder of the International Center for Security and Defense Strategies. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would like to voice my opinion on this topic. So the change of power in the country is the hope for changes in different sectors, and these changes should be not only external but also internal. The changes should be made in the whole structure, and Ukroboronprom should become an exemplary project for transformation, and the new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, should be responsible for this, and according to Constitution, he is responsible for the defense and security sector. First, there should be proper strategic integration into NATO, and it was voiced by Volodymyr Zelensky and his team. And also, a new general staff chief said about the priorities in this area. The main in the military is not the generals, but the most important people are soldiers at the front line, and we should reform Ukroboronprom and the whole sector, and all reforms in the Ministry of Defense and in the whole sector. The reforms should protect each military man and provide the best for them, to provide uniform and all needed equipment. NATO integration also needs proper actions concerning Ukroboronprom. It was said that in Ukraine There are legislative acts that prevent development of defense industry on the whole, and including Ukroboronprom. There are some limitations concerning equipment and personnel, unlike in NATO, and there is lack of competitiveness in the sphere of spare parts and components, and also many other issues and institutions that influence efficiency, and this legislation should be cancelled. And we have a policy for experts, especially exporters. There is no oversight over the activity. There are delays in payments, and also there is lack of assessment in the sphere of research and development. Also, today we were speaking about the first steps, and we've mentioned that we need quality corporate management and supervisory board that exists now. It is not efficient. It is imitation of the corporate governance, where the owner appoints its people to the supervisory board, and it cannot influence the efficiency of the work and asset management in Ukroboronprom. That's why I believe that Ukroboronprom's strategy should reflect not the views of separate politicians, but the global trends. So it is important to develop new equipment. This is the only recipe how to win this hybrid war that is ongoing in the territory of Ukraine. So what are the steps I would propose? And we discussed them with organizers. I would like to thank our co-organizers, to NACO team, and State Watch Expert Organization, that today we openly discuss a very important topic. As General Polishuk said, this is not only about defense industry, this is about the whole defense sector. Introduction of efficient corporate governance and also replacement of personnel. This is one of the first steps that will allow to reload the system, and the second is audit. But I do not understand how the government may order this audit in the organization that is audited. This is nonsense. This means that organization that verifies itself. Can this audit be efficient, and what will be the results of such audit? Next, anti-corruption policy. Anti-corruption policy of Ukroboronprom, it should be completely new. Everyone understands that the biggest team and the anti-corruption activity, it influences the situations, and people require complex investigation, and to answer the questions about structural changes, and the new Ukroboronprom leadership should provide such answers. Also, draft law on public-private partnership. It was developed in 2018. In the sphere of national security, KPMG developed this draft in 2015. It was introduced to Supreme Council, but it was not voted for. This draft law included best practices in order that local market came and bring new technologies to Ukrainian market, not only for Ukraine but for other countries. And these new capabilities would be open, and new weapons may be used in joint forces operation against Russian aggression. They use new military equipment against us. That's why public-private partnership law, this is a big opportunity to transfer technologies that are necessary. And many times we spoke about it, in order to provide new incentive for the development of military and production sector. legislation should be changed. National security law also should be changed. It requires new bylaws in order to complete reforms in this sector of security and defense. And here I believe the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine should have a leading role, not only in the development of laws, but also to provide new vector to military and technical policy and cooperation, a new vector that would say about the transparency, anti-corruption nature of this policy in the future. While preparing this roundtable, we spoke with co-organizers, and maybe based on the results of the roundtable, we would provide proposals and address to new president and his team in order that he would base his decision-taking on these proposals. I believe that this is a good proposal, and I believe that co-organizers would create a working group and to add these proposals in order to form an address to the president as a commander-in-chief to provide proposals on reform of defense and production center, including reform of Ukroboronprom. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to suggest the Q&A session now. We have time for 3 questions. Please be brief. May I take 1 minute? I'm Alexander. I've been dealing with the international arms trade for 20 years. We do not need the international audit now. We have to establish the new supervisory board. The Director General had not remain the only one figure. That's why we have corruption and financial abuse. We need to involve the Ministry of Defense and reform the procedure how the goods, the products are accepted after production according to the state order. Actually, and there are schemes behind this which allow not 1% of profit but 300% of profit. About the supervisory council, it's very important. After the scandal with Gladkovsky, Poroshenko immediately responded. And as far as I know, the 3 candidates were offered for the members of Supervisory Council. And in the last moment, the international intelligence interfered, and the president had not signed that. Okay, the second question from over there and the third from over there. During last 5 years, I'd been participating in, I think, 500 conferences about the problems in Ukroboronprom. And they all had a mutual component. We all discussed the problems, and nobody mentioned the ways how the problems could be resolved. And today I believe that one of you should take responsibility to unite, to collect a working group and to produce the coherent paper, comprehensive paper, what to do. Mr. Zelensky is unable to cope with the problem himself. I have the ready concept how to develop Ukroboronprom. You may disagree, but we need to have a working group which will look at it and decide what to do. The only list of the problems would not help. We have to offer some program of actions. I would like to respond immediately. During our round table, we have one participant, Aivaras, who is advisor to the president. And my suggestion was not to list the problems, but to list the solutions to those problems. We have to introduce effective supervisory council, corporate governance, etc. Okay, let us remain after this event and unite our efforts, produce the program of action, plan of action, what can be done. Then we will provide this action plan to Aivaras in the president will be able to assess whether to respond to this document. I'm Vasily Shurupov. For more than 15 years, I've been cooperating with Spetsnaz and other companies which belong to Ukroboron structure. I think that the problems of Ukroboronprom are rooted in the previous leadership of National Security and Defense Council and the previous parliamentary committee on defense. Because the structure unites the old plants, then design bureaus which have good machinery, which was not demanded, remained not demanded for dozens of years. And design bureaus has no connection to the plants. Then the private enterprises which produce equipment for state order, including the companies owned by Gladkovsky, Poroshenko, they got a lot of money. They got loans with the state guarantees from state banks. I am afraid that those banks would not get that money back. At the same time, Mykolaiv shipyard has no, or tank plant has no such state orders. So the state orders were disseminated among non-quality producers. Now we have 3 billion of subsidies to be paid to Ukroboronprom for 2019. We can make Ukroboronprom profitable only on the account of supplies. You are wrong about the agency payments. Mr. Gurak is here, who employed Barbul in MASH leadership, who wasted the contracts in India, Sri Lanka, in other countries. That contracts were maintained for many years. And of course, the bribes probably were paid, but that was done professionals, and those bribes were not that big as big as now. Those people never allowed themselves to fly I concluded a deal and paid 20% to a mediator. Now, enterprise, they're speaking inquire, we are unable to translate. Iskra plant sells. Impulse plant sales the charges for $90,000. Then some details. He's speaking on the military jargon, which is not understandable. When you look at the Iskra impulse plant, they look very poor, but they are sure. The last statement, again, they are speaking inquire. In coalition agreement 5 years ago, it was mentioned that we have to build our plant of bullets and something else. We did nothing. But actually it was possible to do that within 5 months with actually no money. And that's it's not possible to translate. I would ask our panelists to respond very briefly to the remarks from the audience. I have heard a lot of statements, but I don't like a statement that the financial audit is necessary. Because there are no companies in the world which can take money from the banks but escape from the financial audit. All the financial companies are, all the production companies which take loans should be subject to financial audit of the Big Four, not of the Chamber of Accounts. When a state company like Chamber of Commerce comes to the state company for financial audit, this audit is heavily sabotaged, and we need financial audit from the Big Four, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Deloitte, etc. And this will be done like it is done everywhere in the world by experienced people. This is a company with $1 billion turnover in dollars and should be able to afford such a financial audit at a proper price. I've been dealing with financial audits for 20 years, and I'm sure that they are needed. Olena.
Short remark: who will accept the results of the audit? According to the standards, if supervisory board would correspond the standard, it would create auditors committee, and this won't be the management of Ukroboronprom who accepted the results. This is the issue that is more complex. It doesn't work properly. That's why we've discussed different opportunities to create a transformation team, and that would include the Cabinet of Ministers, participants, and other stakeholders in order to provide fair audit according to the standards. Thank you, Dennis. So I would like to answer briefly. Big Four and Big Three political consultants. So I brought them to Ukroboronprom in 2014, and this helped to carry out these procedures. And when the new leadership was appointed, they asked me to remain as a deputy, and I brought these people. They are highly qualified, but they were fired from Ukroboronprom. About names, we will speak off records about them. So who asked you to come here today to ask us about this? So, Alexander, I will be brief. There was an interesting topic about construction of cartridge plant. Recently, People's Deputy Ivanchuk said that we do not have cartridge plant. We lost it in Lugansk because of occupation. And he said that in Kolomia we should build this plant. And he said, let's speak about good things, but we should not forget that there are clear political interests in this big game with big corruption money. That's why we should have a balance. We thank our speakers and we end the briefing. So I would like to give the floor to Yuriy Gusev. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank for your interest and your activity, and I would like to say that if you want to join the working group to create proposals for the president, we may exchange contacts and we can create a group in the messenger, and Aivaras may provide these proposals to the president. Thank you.
Шановні колеги, будь ласка, перейдіть до передпокою УКМЦ.